You're on mute, Johan. You're on mute.
Unmute. Video is on, no sound. Hi guys, thanks very much. Ryan, first one to you. Have you, from a Scottish perspective, seen any South Africans, perhaps in the URC, guys that impressed you, players that have stood out? Yeah, South African players specifically.
Yeah, well, I mentioned Willemse earlier. Just love watching him. Love the way he plays the game. Love the fact that he's literally no fear. He's happy to try anything and go all out. Arendse obviously is another one. For me, he's just so exciting to watch. And then I guess recently in a team that Sharks stuttering the whole way through the season, and then suddenly, as soon as Masuku, I think the last 4 games, is he man of the match?
Yeah, something like that.
For the Sharks. He's played the last 5 or 6, and they suddenly clicked. And it's like he was the missing part. They got all these superstars in and around him in terms of, Etzebeth, Mapimpis, Lukanyams. And then you put in a 10 that's performing so well. And he's not the biggest name in there, is he? But he's almost the glue that they needed to distribute and put them in the right places. And he's really impressed me towards the latter end of the season. You just think, oh, if they had him at the beginning, they could have been in a very different place, So there's a few to mention.
Yeah, he kind of had to wait for his chance to play. I don't know if Schalk wants to say something because he used to play at the Cheetahs, then he went to the Sharks, but he didn't really get game time at the Sharks up until they were struggling and they gave him an opportunity to play.
Johan, I see totally different. It's since Ox, Bongi, and Vincent Koch started playing together. They gave them forward momentum, and it is actually funny enough. If you take those since Vince started, they haven't lost the game. So it is. I think my facts are right.
Only the front row would come up with the answer that it's the front row.
Yeah, and that's the front row guy saying that the one that also said he would have preferred to play fly half, but anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Just the last one for you, Ryan, then I'll have 2 for Schalk as well. You talked about Franco Smith and his influence at Glasgow, obviously. But in general, the South African influence in Scotland rugby, obviously it goes as far as the national team where you have a lot of players, but I don't necessarily want to focus on that. But you have Duan van der Merwe, the likes of JP Kasta and Piers Schoeman. But then you mentioned Franco, but if we look broader, it's also Sean Everett at Edinburgh. So I mean the South African influence in Scotland is quite a big one. And do you think it has been good for Scottish rugby?
Yeah, it certainly is prominent, isn't it? I think Sean Everett's done a good job coming in. They needed to change at Edinburgh, and he came in. And again, from everything I hear across down the M8 is the boys really like him. I think he's a very different coach to Franco Smith. But yeah, there is a lot of South African influence, and yeah, you mentioned some of the players in the Scotland team, but even with Glasgow, Nathan Macbeth, who's a young tight end who's playing really well. Big JP Dupria, Sintu Manjesi. You've got Carl Steyn, who's obviously a South African, play for Scotland. So Glasgow have got a few South Africans in there, and then Henko Venter, obviously, that came over, and he's done really well. He's played really well every time he's got his opportunity, and has impressed as well. So there is a big South African influence, but I think you've got to do that. I mean, some of the best years we had at Glasgow, we had a huge influx of Fijians. I think we had 5 or 6 Fijians, and it sort of comes in these flows and these trends where all the Fijians came in and we played a certain style of rugby with that, and now we've got some brilliant South African influence, and yeah, it has helped. It has helped Scotland and Glasgow and Edinburgh as well.
Thanks very much.
Can I ask Ryan a question, Jan?
Yes, Scott. Anytime.
So here's a question, because I'm not sitting there. So a lot of the questions I'm getting is more from English and the French. Is because it feels there's more resistance coming from England and from France than there is from, I would say, Ireland, Scotland, Italy, Wales. Is that the experience that you've experienced being there, or not so much?
What do you mean by resistance in terms of picking?
No, not by picking, by actually the South African teams joining. You've got the URC, and then you've got them. That's fine, okay. So the URC is the Vodacom URC is a better product, but them joining Investec Champions League, I felt that there's more resistance between South African teams joining that, although that's a natural progression going to that side. Have you experienced it or not? Or don't you want to answer it?
Sorry, Schalk, I lost you for 2 seconds there, but no, I will answer that. But from what I saying, my internet's unstable suddenly. But we don't have load shedding here, I don't think. No, I think it's just because we've obviously done it in the URC and we've seen how good it's been for us, that maybe they don't understand it as much, especially in England, and maybe that's why there's been a resistance. But like we've been so lucky with what's happened with the league in terms of 16 teams and with the South African teams coming in. I don't think there's a negative word that will go around for the URC from any of the players, anyone involved in it. Suddenly, when they start talking about European Cup, I think maybe that's where you got the resistance, because people are calling it Investec Champions Cup. It is a European thing, and South Africa is European. But I mean, the simple way to change that would be change the name of it, and then you don't have an issue. But no, I'm not sure why you feel like there's more resistance maybe from England. Maybe because they've not seen and been involved in the product of the URC. I reckon that. But you look at them and
it is funny because people do not understand the background with, for example, the reason why I'm saying, to give you context, is the discussion after Jake has not picked his full strength side. A lot of the English sides were quite upset, and I'm like, well, you must understand the depth we have. We don't have the same kind of depth, and if you're not in the top of the URC, you're not going to play Champions League or Investec Champions League next year. So it became quite I got a lot of abuse. Not abuse is the wrong word. How do I phrase this? I got a lot of
animosity.
Criticism. Animosity is not good. Sorry. Yeah.
Johan Schalk Brits is coming for your job, brother.
Yeah, I know. He's not asking the questions now. He's
Taking over
got nothing to do this afternoon.
No, that's why I thought of asking him 2 questions about hookers, not about the backline. So firstly,
well, what kind of hookers you want to talk about?
Firstly, just if you talk about pressure for the position you played in for a player, say in the URC, say for instance it's a line out on the 5-meter line going to score, or even when you're defending. I don't want to necessarily mention names, but I'm going to say now, Joseph Dweba, you don't have to talk about him as a player. I'm just asking a hooker question. Throwing the ball in there, what are the kind of things that might throw a hooker off? Is it just pressure? Is it the calls? Obviously, it's not one thing. Is it concentration? Because that's something like a kicker. You train it every single day at practice, and then sometimes in a game, it just happens where you throw it over, and it was a 5-meter line out to score maybe a maul try. So what are the things that from a hooking perspective, that if you throw in there at the line out?
Okay, it's particular with line outs. It is unfortunate with most things. You start backing how to become a good thrower. You throw, I probably can't use the word, so many times that you feel very comfortable in your skin grabbing that ball. Now, the one thing is throw and throw and throw and throw under pressure. So one of the things I did when I was with the Springboks in 2019 or 2018, I would challenge them for coffees, eventually coffees or anything, with every throwing session, because practicing with no pressure does not help anything, nobody. So you have to challenge, and you have to challenge your position on that. Now, coming to lineouts within teams, there must be a great relationship between the lock and the hooker. Understanding the hooker, what his capability is and what he can't do. Understanding then the analysis within every lineup, the probability of every throw, front, middle, and back, and where the strength of every player's jumping position is. Now, a lot of times people in South Africa, and that was one of the things that I had to get used to, and I was fortunate to play in England for 10 years, to come from Cape Town or Pretoria or Durban. Well, Durban, you've got humidity, but to start teaching yourself to throw in those conditions, that is, for example, in Wales and England, Scotland, it is totally different. You can play at Glasgow, and if the wind is coming down like that, I can remember my toughest throwing was against Connacht. I've never had experienced that, and no matter how many times you can throw in a game or practice, you can't mimic those positions. So 100%. It is very, very tough, but it starts with training, and it starts training under pressure. And the unfortunate thing is, if you start having that monkey on your back, I had it for about 4 months. It is hard getting it off, and every time it's like a kicker. When are you going to kick the next kick over? It's perceived pressure. And then secondly, if you start thinking you're going to miss a line out, stop throwing back. Go play chess or something else. Because that, unfortunately, that is mentally a shit show if you start thinking you can't hit. And it's sometimes with certain locks, you feel you can throw it, and certain locks you can't. And that's why Rassie made the decision that hookers make the choice. So when he was my cats coach, I made the throwing in decision because I can take responsibility for that.
Just to add on that, as a line out forward, there is you can't compare it to kicking, because kicking, it's all down. You're the individual. You have all the controllables in your control. Whereas you're a hooker, there are so many moving parts to that line out that it's unbelievable. Also, 2-3 throws that go amiss, or 2-3 lineouts that don't happen. Equally, the opposition then smell blood, and then they start just piling on. And the amount of times I was going to have a word with the hooker, opposition here, Sky had thrown a couple, 2 or 3 that hadn't gone. Then it would be in his ear as we're walking up to it. Oh, you're under the pump now. We're coming after these. Wow. Then it starts to build. So there's so many moving parts to a line out that the hookers get the bid. That's the bad thing.
It's not. It's a whole pack. Yeah. Schalk, did you mention that when
last thing I would say on that is in the olden days you will do lineouts with no competition. The guy would just jump and you run your formation. And this is now a long time with Springboks and with Saris. We never, as a team, just jumped up and down and there was no competition. You have to practice under pressure, and I don't know what they're doing at the Stormers, but hopefully they do that.
Yeah. Did you mention that the line-out responsibilities when you played at the Cats was given to the hooker?
Yeah.
Not the law calling it.
No, but that was the system. Look, Rassie experiments with a lot of different systems. There was, like, you would walk in, the way contesting has changed. So back in the day, you would walk in with different pods, like 3-3-1 or 1-3-1, 3-1-3, and then 1-3-3. And so if you would call different options after that, so then they would move into different formations. And it was very clever the way he did it. We just Rassie has changed it a bit, but it is better. I think if you look at the total picture, I think it's sometimes not well. I would still like to call it but Rassie liked the way the locks call it, and most locks want to take that responsibility.
Yeah. My last question is actually about Rassie. If you did play under him, and we have watched Chasing the Sun a lot, where we get a lot of insight into the team. We know that things like discipline is very important. You know, the stats, work rate of the players, the amount of tackles. They look at everything like any high performance or professional team. But from a hooker perspective, again, what are the things that weighs the most important for Rassie when he's the coach, if you're the hooker? Is it to get all your lineouts, to do scrum well, or is it the stats? Which of those? Where's the balance if he looks at the kind of perfect hooker? Obviously, we know Bongi and Malcolm has been the 2 top block hookers at the moment. But what are the things that him as a coach, what weighs the most?
Well, I don't know on what. The one thing I would say is, firstly, he looks at entitlement. So he said in the first meeting, I haven't gone through this whole Chasing the Sun, but one thing he said in 2019 is, I will not pick the best player, but I'll pick the right player. Meaning, and we focus a lot on entitlement. Secondly, the one thing he looked at is he's asking in his meetings and everything is your battle contributions. Are you a warrior? Are you truthful? If you're going to say that, I don't know if it's on this. Well, anyway, I can always remember, if you made a promise, he'll keep you to your promise. And he wants warriors, and he wants warriors to go out there. It doesn't matter that you miss a tackle or that you throw in the ball in skew. What he does want is you to put your hand up and making battle contributions. Now, from a general rugby perspective, from a hooker perspective, he wants to make sure that you fit into the scrumming setup. That will be Don's responsibility. Don will give him information on the throw, on the scrumming. Can he get to a certain height, and do you scrum well with the other props? Secondly, on the liner perspective, that will be, can you throw in the ball under pressure? And that is only with time. In the beginning, you get very exciting hookers, but they struggle. No one's perfect, but they struggle sometimes in the beginning to under pressure. And that's like kickers. That's like most people. But as they get used to pressure, they normally become better because they understand how to manage pressure, how to manage process. And so from that perspective, I think it's going to be very interesting who Rassie is going to pick when either Malcolm or Bongi is not there. What is this? Because if you look at the 2023, Dion came in, he didn't bring another hooker in. He played Eskom as reserve hooker as well. But I mean, it's going to be very, very interesting to see who he's going to pick going forward. Because I think with Dweba, personally, I think he was a very emotional thing for him that he wasn't. I guess if I was in his position and I wasn't selected and they didn't bring in, that would have probably tinkered or had a massive impact on his confidence. From Russ's perspective, he would say, well, I did something that I thought was the best for the team. So Rassie's always never lets personal emotions get involved with decision making that's best for the team and for the probability of the team winning. Now going forward is he can't put Dion in while he's injured currently. Who's he going to play as hooker when the other two isn't there? Is it going to be Dweba? Is it going to be Johan? There's a lot of hookers actually putting their hand up. And that's going to be interesting. Who's the next breed of hookers coming through that's challenging the two alpha males at the top?